I'd like to call to order the Plan and Zone Commission meeting of tonight, September 17th. I would like to ask all those in participation in the audience to please turn off your cell phones as it could interfere with our audio. I also need to advise anybody coming up to speak that they speak clearly and loudly into the microphones, including our commissioners, since it's my understanding we have some audio and visual challenges tonight with our recording system. If you could help me out with that, I would appreciate it. We'll start with our public hearing. Roll call, Commissioner Tallman.
Schneider. Lammers.
Present.
Med.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Tallman here. Ingram.
Present.
Connell's excused. Hepner.
Here.
Bransgard.
Here.
Reinhartz.
Here.
Manus.
Here.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Tallman. First case would be REZ 19-1010, a request of Larry Whitty on behalf of KJTLJ LLC to rezone .73 acres MOL, a property located at the southeast corner of West Locust Street and Ripley Street from R4C single family and two family center residential zoning district to C2 corridor commercial district. Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioners, this item was tabled from the last Plan and Zoning Commission hearing. I believe the petitioner's representative is here today. Property is located just west of Harrison on the south side of Locust Street, currently zoned R4. There were several homes that were demolished to facilitate this request, which is to facilitate commercial development. This is the purpose statement. Typically, C2 properties are oriented towards larger transportation corridors. Harrison and West Locust are both arterial streets. I love the timing of this. Problem fixed. For some reason my slides aren't working on. We did have a neighborhood meeting. We had a couple people that showed up, mostly people representing interest in the area, such as St. Ambrose, Hilltop Organization. Obviously, the last public hearing, we had a couple people speak. I think some people questioned the need for C2 zoning when there's C1 zoning in the area. Really just a public hearing tonight. Here to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Ryan. Commissioners, any questions at this time? Seeing none, thank you, Ryan. Would the petitioner like to step forward at this time?
I'm Tim Whitty, stepping in for my brother Larry, who's in Colorado. Here to answer any questions that you guys have about our request.
Do you want to do any additional information? Is there any new information you'd like to present to us?
You know, we want C2. We think it's going to help the investors and developers, move that property and, gives them more opportunities. So, hence the C2 zoning. So. We've already had some requests for C2 already, and so we're feeling that might be a need there.
Okay, Commissioner Tallman.
I think you may have already answered this, but so you have no specific use at this time? You just have some things, and I guess after you answer that, I mean, how hot are these leads or proposals that you're receiving? Is it something that you see that's going to be happening?
Yeah, we do. I guess, what was the question? What was your question?
If you have any solid uses in mind from these conversations you're having with other people to seek the C2 zoning instead of C1.
Yeah, we've had, multi-family requests, 2-3-story buildings with commercial below was one of them. Local business wants to, set up shop there, and they've requested a C2 need. So, between multifamily, commercial, retail, underneath, the multifamily structure.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lammers.
I think it's quite a leap to go from residential to C2. Are there any conversations, especially with the ones you've had already, that could still be successful on a C1 zoning if they were altered in any way to be able to conform to a C1?
I mean, we've asked the question. I think, reluctantly they say yes. But to answer your question, I think at this point, yes, that can happen.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions at this time? Commissioner Schneider?
What is the,
Jane, other button.
sorry, what is the difference between the C1 and C2 that it really is kind of disproportionate that's, causing someone to say, I'd really like it to be C2?
They haven't been real clear with us on it because it's a new concept for them. So I really can't answer that question for you.
I mean, the thing that bothers me is the auto part. I'm just throwing that out there. Is there any opportunity for anything like that you've heard of?
The auto part?
Yes, with C2?
No, we haven't had any requests for that.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions of the petitioner? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak in favor of this petition? Seeing none, would anybody like to speak in opposition at this time? Please step forward.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. My name's Scott Tunnicliffe. I'm the director of the Hilltop Campus Village, and we've been very, very pleased to see the redevelopment that's gone forward to date. It's appropriate for St. Ambrose across the street to see something that's not quite as, or not nearly as rundown and unfriendly toward enrollees. It's also appropriate that we see the opportunity for something that's consistent with the C1 zonings that's along a large part of the corridor. And since this particular parcel is a part of the Hilltop Campus Village District, we're very supportive of the idea of going from where it is an R4 to a C1 district. We think that's more consistent, easier to fit in, and we have some concern that if it were a C2, it would be something that would possibly not be consistent with what we have. Our view might be different if we had an idea of what the plan was, but to make a leap from R4 to C2 is a little more than we think is necessary at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lammers.
Scott, I have a question for you, if you wouldn't mind. You have if let's say we heard retail with apartments on the top, you have that stretch of exactly that configuration on Harrison Street. Do you have retail in the base yet?
No, there is no retail in that first Harrison Loft
Right.
apartment, if that's
That's what
you're
I'm
mentioning.
asking about.
That's a 60 residential unit, and the last I heard, 58 of them are occupied, but for a variety of reasons,
Sure.
they've not been able to occupy those
The
that are
retail.
commercial.
Okay, thank you, sir.
You bet. Any other questions? Okay.
Seeing none, thank you. Wait, Commissioner Schneider?
Please. Yeah. I mean, what could you see going in there with a C2 that would be, really prohibitive, that would be something that you would be so opposed to?
Well, I'm not suggesting that this is anything like what Tim is fielding as far as inquiries, but C2 would allow for the sale of packaged liquors. It would allow for, I believe, gas stations, and it would increase the ability of the setback line to be increased. Our fear is that it would become, frankly, very similar to a lot of the strip malls that currently dot Locust Street, and we're anxious to see that the Hilltop is better than that, not slamming anybody that are businesses in that nature. Okay.
Any additional questions at this time? Thank you, Scott. Would anybody else like to speak in opposition at this time? Seeing none, commissioners, any questions of staff or the petitioner? Seeing none, we will close case REZ 19-010 and would expect to see that back in front of us at our next meeting. We'll move on to new business, public hearing for case ORG 19-03, request of the City of Davenport to reduce maximum building height and portion of the C-E Elmore Corners zoning district from 120 feet to 55 feet. Brandon?
All right. City of Davenport is the petitioner for this, if it wasn't mentioned. So, City Council added the following condition to a plat that was approved in 2014 that established the 50-foot height limitation in a specified area near Elmore Corners, which there's a map later on. We'll show you that right there. So that was on the plat. That's not subject to a rezoning condition. That's kind of the basis for some of this discussion, or part of. So under the old zoning ordinance, the property was zoned PDD, so there was really no strict height limitation at all. It came down to the design review to and plan and zoning to make a determination of what the appropriate height would be in that district. And just for a point of reference, Rhythm City Casino is 106 feet tall. So further down the road, 2017 Elmore Corners area plan was adopted. Some of the concepts that it mentions are protections against, protections from non-compatible uses from surrounding areas near Elmore Corners. And within the site layout section of the plan, it talks about buildings should be 3 to 4 stories in height adjacent to the neighborhood. Some other supporting evidence: the vast majority of the illustrative examples given in that plan are 2 to 4 stories, and the one hotel concept that was 6 stories in height was more targeted towards the entertainment district, more adjacent to the casino. So under the new zoning ordinance, we established the zoning classification CE for Elmore Corners zoning district, and the maximum height currently for that district is 120 feet. This was largely to do with Rhythm City Casino being 106 feet and remaining in a legally conforming status. Also worth mentioning, the Design Review Board does have authority to review and approve any new development in Elmore Corners. So there are some protections in place in that regard. Staff believes that the intent of the scale of the development on property adjacent to Jersey Farms, which is the neighborhood in question, is pretty clear. Any development exceeding 4 stories would have to have an exceptional design and be oriented away from the subdivision. However, Council has requested staff draft an amendment reducing the maximum height from 120 to 55 feet for the area west and south of Elmore Avenue. This is what that text amendment would look like in our dimensional standards table. Just under building height, we would specify the geography that we're sort of discussing today, and I'll show you that here in a couple of slides. The owners of the property were notified because it had the potential to limit development in this area. versus what's allowed currently. So here's the neighborhood, Jersey Farms in yellow. You can see is sort of the neighborhood in question. This is all of Elmore Corners, the CE district. So you can see those two in relation to each other. So the plat that I referred to initially was just this lot on that plat that had the 50-foot height restriction. What's being proposed would be everything that is south and west of Elmore Avenue as a buffer between Elmore Avenue, or excuse me, Elmore Corners and the neighborhood. So everything in blue here, including the black, would have that 55-foot height limitation. So are there any questions?
Thank you, Brandon. Questions at this time, commissioners? Commissioner Reinertz.
Yeah, Brandon, is this change designed to return it to what city council originally had laid out for the neighborhood? When they were talking about neighborhood protections?
So let's back up a little bit and maybe I can explain it a little bit. So city council added the condition on the plat. That was that smaller area, that sort of that wedge shape. That was the condition on the plat, and so there was, an intention for that to have some hard protections during that time, under those conditions at the time. So, where we got to from there, at the time it was a PDD, so, it would have to go through design review and it would have to go through plan and zoning for anything, of any, to approve any height that was in that district. But this plat limited that strictly. So I guess for your question, there was an intention on that specific spot to limit the height to protect those neighbors. I guess what we moved to and getting away from, and moving toward the Elmore Corners Design District was that there were protections in place from the Design Review Board to look at those conditions and apply the design standards that are written out in that Elmore Corners plan, the 2017 plan. So I guess it's not a very direct answer, but I think, along the way there have been some restrictions built into the zoning of the area that would allow for some discussion before, a 120-foot building were to be sited in that area adjacent to the neighborhood.
So in reality then, the change is designed to protect the neighborhood?
Change is designed to protect the neighborhood. I believe that's what council is proposing.
Okay, fine, thank you.
Yep.
Commissioner Lammers.
You may have answered it, but if, let's say this went through, is there still an opportunity for a conversation to happen for something taller than the 55 feet per the old design review board and the plan and zoning?
That would require a hardship variance, I believe. So there would be some discussion there. But, you would have that added step of a hardship variance being required, I believe, in addition to a design review board discussion.
Okay,
And
thank you.
correct me if I'm wrong back there. Okay.
Commissioner Manus.
Why 55? Tell me how you selected that number.
I don't know why 55 was selected in particular. I'm not sure if Scott has an idea.
From what I understand is that a lot of the hotels that have been going in the area near 46 and Elmore, some of those hotels, and on the other side where Utica is, those hotels are approximately 55 feet. So they wanted to make sure that the hotels that we have been coming forward would be allowed to be built.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hepner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Design Review Board would be able to
I don't believe,
Or would it
no,
take
no.
a-
With this restriction, they wouldn't be able to completely override the restriction that's being placed on this specific geography. It would require design review, board approval on top of a hardship variance.
Okay, gotcha. 55 feet is a 4-story building typically. That's the number. Anyway, thank you.
Commissioner Johnson.
Just curious if we know what the building height of the call home is.
I don't have that off the top of my head.
Anybody? Approximate. Okay.
If I remember right, the call home's 4 stories. I gotta believe it's taller than 55 feet, but not by a great amount. It's 3? Okay, I was thinking it was 4. My mistake. So I would think that it has to be in that region. Do you have anything else, Commissioner Johnson? Commissioner Schneider.
Go ahead. Yeah.
How many property owners does this affect? What's the impact?
Well, I guess everyone in the neighborhood, and then all the owners of the property of the, that around Elmore Corners and that geography.
Well,
that
that's really
showed
what
you.
I
I'm
mean.
sorry, I don't
Yeah,
have a
just around the
specific
corner.
number for
Yeah.
you. If I had to guess, it would be 100.
100 that own
Between
around.
the neighborhood and, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
of just the.
Yes.
I'm not sure. I think there's one larger landowner, but there may be some others as well. I'm pinch hitting tonight, so. But we can answer those questions at the next meeting before we vote.
Commissioner Johnson.
I'm sorry, I do have one other question. I'm just curious of, or if we could get possibly for the next meeting, a picture of the topography around that area.
Sure.
Just curious what what some other pictures would look like.
Okay. Yeah, you're welcome.
Commissioner Reinhardt.
Thank you. Do we know how many members of city council are in favor of, or brought this to your attention, or made this request?
No. I'm not sure. I just know that we were directed by city council, so I would assume a majority.
Okay, so city council think this is a good idea. All right, thank you.
Any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you, Brandon.
Yeah, and I would like to kind of rephrase that. I can't assume a majority. It could be any one council person that brings it forward to make it, to be considered under the council, and it won't be the opinion of the council until it's voted on.
Right, that shouldn't be really part of our basis of a
Right.
decision, so I want to make that perfectly clear that I don't think that question needs to be answered. Anything else?
Not for me.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Would anybody from the audience that would like to speak in favor of this petition, please step forward now.
Good evening. My name is Tom Jacobson, a resident of the 6th Ward and Jersey Farms subdivision, and actually I'm president of the Jersey Farms Neighborhood Association. And honestly, through Alderman Clue, we were kind of the driver behind this concern as it was raised. To give you a point of reference, we're talking about Jersey Farms. See on the map there, on the very north side is Veterans Memorial Highway. The far left corner would be the call home. And to the right, in the northeast corner, is where Mill Chevrolet is at. And then coming down Elmore, you're coming down to the south there. So the current zoning as it is in place today would allow then the 120-foot building height to the area that's immediately north and east of Jersey Farms, where you see the kind of the yellowish sign right there right now. By way of background, back when the casino went in, that area north of Jersey Farms back in 2014 actually was a combination of PDD and residential and agricultural. And through a series of zonings, there was the casino overlay district, and obviously we had some concerns at that time about the casino construction and some of the conditions that were put in place as a result of some negotiations, one of which, item number 26 on the resolution F14-11 approving the casino was that area north along Veterans Highway had a restricted building height of 50-foot high to protect on the north side of the subdivision. So that was put in the city resolution and passed in October of 2014. To the east side, where Mill Chevrolet is, to the south, when that was PDD, and then it became the Jersey Farms third commercial edition with Mill Chevrolet, and Mill Chevrolet was restricted to 45 feet, and that's about a 2.5-story building on there. The Call Home's 3 stories on the north side. Mill Chevrolet's is about 2.5 stories on the east side. So that transitioned then to the Elmore Corners Overlay District, which conditions stayed in place, and then that transitioned into the Elmore Corners CE District, which was part of the new zoning passed roughly January this past year. And truthfully, that kind of got passed, and we kind of missed that there was a little new inclusion into that new zoning that it allowed for the 120-foot building height immediately adjacent to Jersey Farms on the east side and the north side. And thus, that was our concern. The resolution had already limited it to 45 feet on the north side, and with the current zoning, the CE zoning, the way that works now is there is no further review by planning, zoning, or city council. As it stands today, that 120-foot building height goes in effect, and as long as the plan falls within those parameters, it's subject to the design review board review, but there's no other look for it at it by this board or by city council. So that was a particular concern. We were told the intent was not to have those 120-foot buildings immediately adjacent to a residential neighborhood, but our request is to have the zoning match the intent. So where that brought us today is the recommendation here to limit that building height in the area immediately east and north of Jersey Farms from 120 foot to 55 foot would definitely be better. It's a little bit taller than what the original zoning restriction was. However, the 120 foot is much worse than having the 55-foot building height along that side. So we're in support of that resolution of limiting the height in that, essentially the area all the way along the west side of Elmore. So really north and west of that area brings the area immediately adjacent to the subdivision to 55-foot. Now my concern would be is if the administrative variance is allowed, then the 55-foot could become 60-foot, which is a concern. However, the 55-foot is better than 120 feet, and at least gives the height protection for the neighborhood. Relative to the topography, I think a question came up to it. If you were on the east side there of Jersey Farms looking over towards Elmore, that's probably about a 25 or 30-foot raise in elevation next to Elmore, so that the geography on Elmore is considerably higher. If you stand in the Jersey Farms and looking east towards Elmore, you are looking uphill. So that was a concern we had as well, because tall buildings on higher elevation are really going to be tall. However, we recognize that there needs to be some development there. We think it's a reasonable compromise from the 120 to the 55. We can hold it at 55, and it protects the neighbors that border along that potential development.
Thank you. Anybody, Commissioner Matt?
Thank you. Just one question. You mentioned that someone had told you what the intent was of, who would that be? Who sets the intent?
Mr. Berger.
Who?
Mr. Berger.
I don't know.
Yeah, he's community development.
Oh, of Davenport, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so he's the one that kind of set the intent idea on this piece.
That was a verbal conversation we had when we were raising some concerns.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next.
Would anybody else like to speak in favor of this petition? Please step forward. Seeing none, would anybody in the audience like to speak in opposition of this petition? Please step forward and identify yourself.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Candy Pasternak. I'm here on behalf of an objector to this proposed rezoning. Hopefully you each received the copy of our letter and what we put in our letter, as well as the map that we provided relative to the 15 some odd acres that our client owns in the area to be affected. And what's interesting is the discussion that has previously taken place relative to the fact that this proposed protection is designed to be immediately adjacent to the neighborhood. And I checked with Mr. Flynn before I started because frankly I didn't want to have egg on my face and tell you the wrong area. But our map and the property, the 15 point some odd acres that I'm talking about, is at the very south end of the proposed rezoned district. I mean, the diagram that had the black and blue check might be more beneficial to look at if you wouldn't mind. Thank you. But I believe we're at the very south triangle that is not adjacent, doesn't abut, doesn't have anything to do with the Jersey Farms neighborhood. But even if that weren't the case, the position that we put in our letter objecting to the proposed rezoning still stands. We have a situation where the P&Z, along with the City Council, approved the new Elmore Corners Overlay District. And you may recall that I was here talking at that time, too, in opposition to some of the restrictions that were going to be imposed by the Elmore Corners Overlay District. Now we have a situation where if you happen to be in the district, but you're on the north and east side of Elmore, you don't have a height restriction. But if you're on the west and south side of Elmore, you are going to have that restriction, which we believe is arbitrary and capricious. Why is the 15.5 acres approximately that we have, I'm corrected, 15.24 acres that our client has down there, why should that be penalized as compared to the property over to the east of Elmore, just north of 60th? And we believe that the intent, I frankly can't speak to the intent, but I can speak to what was set forth in the plan for the Elmore Corners Overlay District. And I know that the city went to a great deal of expense, not only in monetary expense, but in time and design concepts and planning in putting together with the consultant the Elmore Corners Overlay District plan. I did review the bullet points. I tried to find within the Elmore Corners Overlay District plan the reference to the quote-unquote, within the site layout section of the plan, it references buildings should be 3 to 4 stories in height adjacent to the neighborhood. I did find that. I believe it is on page 13 of what had previously been presented last year for the Elmore Corners Overlay District. And my reading of it, and I could be mistaken, but my reading of it was a clear intention to make it that reference to the area south of the call home, I believe. And so they wanted that area and south of the casino to be the 3 to 4 stories height. And maybe I misread it, but that's on page 13 of the previous plan that had been submitted before. We have a very positive situation in that our council listens to the neighbors and tries to address their concerns, but I was employed by someone who had a saying that was, when the employees get to decide what we're doing, it's the tail wagging the dog. And I'm going to steal that comment from him because I think we have a situation here where a group of neighbors is essentially the tail wagging the dog, at risk to owners of property seeking development opportunities for the city of Davenport. The Elmore Corners Overlay District, I think the intent in the plan was to help encourage development. I like to think that we sometimes have at our firm our ear to the ground in terms of new development opportunities, and I'm sure we're not alone, but I know that we haven't heard a lot of development being planned out in the area based on the current zoning restrictions. The other really important factor that I think this commission has already addressed is the fact that you have a built-in protection in your overlay district in that any plans have to be approved by the Design Review Committee. To then add to that the requirement that the owner, particularly in our situation of that very south 15.24 acres, is going to have to establish a hardship variance if their plans for, I think that they're trying to court a hotel development. The other opportunity that they were talking about was more senior housing development. But in either event, it makes it very, very difficult, and we have to jump through that additional hurdle of the hardship variance. So, thank you for your time this evening. We again stand by the objection that we raised in our letter and appreciate your attention to our objection.
Thank you. Would Commissioner Tallman?
Thank you. I just do have just to clarify, you're not necessarily speaking against the whole, what we're seeing here tonight. You're more concerned about your client and that southern piece, is that correct?
That would be a fair statement, but I think that the same analysis might apply. But definitely, with the property, the concerns that's raised by the neighborhood and the concern regarding the property immediately adjacent to it, we're not in that category of property.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Commissioner Schneider?
Do you have, does the firm that you're representing have a time frame associated with when they would like to do some development?
No, they haven't indicated that.
Commissioner Lammers?
I remember a discussion with the Elmore Design Group where they actually had a section that was contrary to what the new design standards were. Do we have that opportunity here to revisit, at least in a discussion, the territory down at the bottom that might not be surrounded by residential?
I think that question's been raised by Candy, and I will address that additionally to CPED when I have my meeting with Matt.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Johnson?
I seem to recall that if we're looking at this drawing, this exact one, that area, the brown square, that we approved a subdivision plat for that area, right, to the...
Yep, right there, you're right.
Did we?
To extend the residential subdivision on the west.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you, Candy.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak in opposition at this time? Seeing none, but before I close this petition, I need to back up a little bit. With all due respect, Mr. Jacobson, your comment and Commissioner Med's additional question as to who made that comment in regard to the 50-foot, we really can't accept that statement in that Mr. Flynn is not here to, or Mr. Berger is not here to confirm or deny that, so I don't want anybody on this commission to use that as a reason to vote in favor or in denial of. That really shouldn't have been discussed. They should have stopped that question at its time. So I'd appreciate everybody to strike that thought, and we'll move forward. Commissioner Med.
Question then, can we get an answer next time?
It could be addressed to staff that we find out where that comment came from, but to take it from
I understand,
a non-staff member, we can't do that.
But as we spent the time we did spend with this plan and zoning, and to all of a sudden have some intent that doesn't seem to line up with what staff did in plan and zoning, that's why I was asking it. So
noted.
Thank you.
I think one thing from the staff perspective, that the Elmore Corners plan that was approved through council, so the intent of that plan is what staff is trying to convey in our presentation, and probably what was in that conversation. But again, I won't speculate to what that specific conversation was.
Thank you, Brandon.
I understand.
Thank you. Any additional questions or concerns at this time? Seeing none, we will therefore close public hearing for case ORD 19-03. It too will return to us at our next meeting with staff comments. That would conclude the public hearing. We will move on to our regular meeting. Roll call, please.
Schneider.
Here.
Lammers.
Present.
Med.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Tallman here. Ingram.
Present.
Connell's excused. Hepner.
Here.
Bransgard.
Here.
Reinhart's.
Here.
And Manus.
Here.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Tallman. Report of City Council activity.
Nothing more to add.
Thank you. Secretary's report.
Move report.
Second.
We have a Commissioner Lammers.
It's just something small, but in the attendance, there's a missing comment between Johnson and Lammers. So it looks like we're Johnson and Lammers and not two separate people. So we just need a comma there.
I overlooked
Thank you.
So noted.
Hold on, I gotta write that note down.
Yeah, make sure we vote on that. It's been moved and seconded to
Seconded, I'm sorry.
correct Commissioner Hepner to make a minor correction. All in favor of Secretary's report signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is approved as amended. We have report of City Council, comp plan.
Nothing at this time.
Thank you. Zoning, we have no new activity. Subdivision, we do have some new business. Commissioner Lammers.
Yes, we do subdivision activity. No old business, new business. We have 3 cases. The first being case F19-15 of Terry Whitson. I believe I'm pronouncing that correct. For final plat, Whitson subdivision on 1.69 acres at 3802 Boise Avenue, containing 3 lots zoned for single and 2-family residential, Ward 1. Staff recommends that the City Plan and Zoning Commission accept the listed findings and forward F19-15 to the City Council with a recommendation for approval as proposed, and I so move.
It's been moved and seconded to discuss F19-15. Scott.
Originally, there were no comments, but engineering submitted comments after we submitted the packet for upload. They have a comment that they would want a condition that section 162440 the conditions of that section shall be met by the plat, and that specifically pertains to pavement of the street and the installation of a cul-de-sac. So all plats need to meet these platting conditions, but we just wanted an overt mention of it because right now it's a gravel street, and so we wanted to make it clear that that's not acceptable to the city. So otherwise, staff recommends approval subject to that one condition.
Commissioner Tallman.
I would move that we include that additional condition per staff's comments.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to add the condition for pavement of the street, and I don't remember the exact number.
162440.
162440. Any comments or questions? Commissioner Manus?
No.
Okay. Any additional thoughts or questions? Seeing none, roll call, please. This is for the amended condition, or the addition of the condition. We can do it. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, it has been added. Any comments or questions about the original petition plus the condition at this time? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Schneider.
Yes.
Lammers.
Yes.
Med.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Tallman, yes. Hepner.
Yes.
Bransgard.
Yes.
Reinhardt.
Yes.
And Manus.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Second case. Case P19-16, request of Cook Real Estate Development for a final plat of a lot, or a lot? Is it a lot? Of storage subdivision on 5.53 acres located in unincorporated Scott County, southwest of the Locust Street Interstate 280 interchange, containing 2 lots adjacent to Ward 1. Staff recommends Plan and Zoning Commission accept the listed finding and forward case F19-16 to the City Council with a recommendation for approval, and I so move.
Second.
Case F19-16 has been moved and seconded for discussion. Staff?
This is just another one of those extraterritorial reviews that we do for Scott County for any plat that occurs within I believe it's a 2-mile radius of the city. So we've laid out our findings and answer any questions if you have them.
Would anybody in the audience like to speak on this case? Seeing none, Commissioner Tallman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick clarification for staff. This number P19-16, should it be F? Okay.
That's correct, yes. It was a typo.
Oh, I've got it on my scorecard as F, so just
right.
making sure. Thanks.
Thank you for noting that, Commissioner Tallman. Any additional questions? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Lammers.
Yes.
Med.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Tallman, yes. Hepner.
Yes.
Ransgard.
Yes.
Reinhardt.
Yes.
Manus.
Yes.
And Schneider.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, before I read the last one, is it a P or an F for P1903, or should it be F19?
It's a P.
P?
P, yep.
Should be a P.
Okay, dang, I thought I was on top of things. All right. Case P1903, request of Axiom Consultants for a preliminary plat for an 83-lot subdivision on 25.07 acres, more or less, of property located immediately west and north of Prairie Heights First Edition. Staff recommends the Plan and Zoning Commission accept the 2 listed findings and forward case P19-03 to the City Council, subject to the 9 listed conditions, and I so move.
Second.
Case P19-03 has been moved and seconded for discussion. Staff?
One sort of last minute item that was I got a call this morning from one of the representatives for the owner that one of the conditions was that the outlots be labeled, and he wanted to bring that up for clarification for their intended use. So outlot A was intended for green space, water detention. Outlot B was to be possibly be dedicated to the city. Outlot C would potentially be 8 to 9 lots, or it would be used for connectivity. And outlot D would combine potentially with lot 40. So there's some conceptual ideas out there about the intended use for those lots, and they will be defined before council sees this.
Will we see that before our next meeting to vote on it?
This is the voting meeting. Yeah.
I understand. I misstepped that.
Right.
So it will be before council.
It will be before council, and it's included in the list, the conditions that are listed.
Okay. Would anybody in the audience like to speak in favor or opposition?
Good evening. Brian Belk, Axiom Consultants. We're the engineer for the project and representing the owner applicant, High Property Management, as well here this evening. Just really wanted to be here to answer any questions you may have. I was going to address the outlots, but that was already handled there by Brandon, so thank you. But again, I'll just reiterate that outlot A, green space detention, that outlot B is a really a very small piece of land that it would be a right-of-way dedication, or we could adjust the right-of-way to be a little wider in that spot, but it doesn't line up with exactly where the city land already is. As he mentioned, outlot C has been looked at on a couple different levels of some larger lots and or some senior living, and then which would be rezoned if it needed to be. And then outlot D, we're going to share some of that with lot 40, and then leave a little bit of that for a mailbox cluster / signage area as well. All other staff comments we fully acknowledge. We've actually, I think, taken care of all of them already to date with our revised preliminary plat in terms of labeling, adding lines for the water course, and showing easements for floodplain. Yeah, and then this is just a continuation of the previously built upon Prairie Heights single-family subdivision that's been going on for a number of years. Just a continuation as we move west into that. Happy to answer any questions.
Commission, any questions of the petitioner? Seeing none, thank you. Any last chance for questions? Seeing none? Roll call, please.
Ahmed,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Tallman, yes. Hepner,
Yes.
Bransgard,
Yes.
Reinhardt,
Yes.
Manus,
Yes.
Schneider,
Yes.
and Lammers.
Yes.
Motion carries.
That concludes the subdivision activities.
Thank you, Commissioner Lammers. As a point of clarification, just so everybody on the commission understands, the suffix of a P or an F corresponds with whether it's a preliminary plat or a final plat. That's where that comes from, so for future reference. Any future business? Staff, anything? Nothing?
Nothing at this time.
Communications or other business at this time?
Nope.
Would anybody in the audience like to make an additional comment? Seeing none?
Move to adjourn.
All those in favor of adjournment signify by aye. Opposed? We are therefore adjourned. Please drive home safely, and thank you for your attendance.